Finally, Mark, the one that I've always found really, really interesting. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And it's that last line that is kind of startling, because there's really clear direction here. They're going to the empty tomb. There's an angel who greets them, or two men or a young man dressed in a white robe. Don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus crucified. He's been raised. Like the best news they could have imagined. He has been raised. He is not here. He is going ahead of you. And then go and tell the disciples and Peter. And I love that inclusion of Peter. In the same way that John has the story of Jesus asking Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And Peter gets to answer 3 times, "Yes, I do," making up for the 3 times he denied his Lord. Like there's this recommissioning. I think this is Mark's way of doing that too. Go tell the disciples and Peter, the one who needs it the most. The one who has least reason to imagine that I would send a personal note to him after the last time he just denied me. So there's this kind of, I think, momentary poignancy there. Go tell the disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of Galilee. There you will see him just like he promised. This kind of reassurance of promise. And so they went out and fled from the tomb. That's the first discordant note. Fled. Okay, ran. For terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. The story ends in failure. It is just absolutely kind of disturbing. And for that reason, later manuscripts of Mark, like centuries later, someone, I'm guessing it was a monk whose job was to copy the scriptures down because there were no printing presses, read that and thought what I did. That can't be right. And then he had this other idea. I can fix that. And so you get the shorter ending of Mark, and all that had been commanded them, they told briefly to those around Peter. And afterwards, Jesus himself sent out through them from east to west the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. That is the resolution we were looking for. What's interesting is just reading that sentence or two, nothing in that sentence. There are several things that sound familiar, like, okay, went to tell them and those around Peter. Afterwards, Jesus himself sent out through them from east to west. That feels a little bit like the Great Commission in Matthew. And then the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. There are like 3 or 4 words in that sentence that Mark doesn't use anywhere else in the whole gospel. Like it just doesn't feel or sound like Mark because it's not. It's an anxious monk. And then, like even later, there's what's called a longer ending of Mark. And this is so long, I didn't want to put it all in here. And that one just gets weird because that's the one where it says, and he gave them power to handle poisonous snakes, and so that even if they were bitten, they wouldn't die. So if you ever wonder where the sort of, I don't know, bayou, I associate with the bayou, I have no idea, charismatic snake handling of revivalist Christians, if you've ever seen movies or like that's where. And it just gets so odd, like it gets more and more fantastical. But let's go back to the way it actually ends. That was disturbing enough that people felt like they better finish the story for Mark in a better way. So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. So I was always like, again, found this odd, alarming, striking, peculiar, like it's the kind of ending that won't let you go. And part of it is like, not only do you have the good news, Jesus has been raised, he is not here. there's very clear instructions, go and tell. And then what struck me, and actually this was not my insight. I do not remember who I learned it from. I just know I never would have thought of this on my own. But there is this interesting pattern that runs across Mark's gospel, which is that the people who should know who Jesus is don't always tell, or they don't always recognize Jesus. And the people who do recognize who Jesus is, you can't count on for a testimony. And so, like a couple quick examples. In the 5th chapter of Mark, he is in the land of the Gerasenes, so a foreign land, and it's when the young man is possessed. And Jesus comes, and the demons recognize Jesus. Like the demons speaking out of, this is like exorcist imagery, speaking out of the man, the possessed man, say, Jesus, Son of the Almighty, what do you have to do with us? Like the demon recognizes who Jesus is. But here's the thing. Can you count on a demon for a testimony? No, you cannot. The other scene where someone that is a little surprising absolutely recognizes Jesus is at the foot of the cross. As Jesus is dying, the Roman centurion who just put him to death says, truly, this man was the Son of God. Like, he gets it. But can you count on a Roman centurion for a testimony? No, you cannot. The disciples regularly are with Jesus and do not know what to say. This is more true in Mark's gospel than anywhere else. I mean, Jesus predicts his death and resurrection 3 different times. And it's kind of like he has to do it 3 times because they're not paying attention. One of them, he is saying to them, we're going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be handed over. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to die. On the 3rd day, we're going to rise again. And the disciples answer by saying, Lord, who's the greatest among us? It's like right over. It's like Jesus saying, just so you know, it's going to get bad. I'm going to die, but then I'll rise again. And the disciples answer, like they're borderline idiots in Mark's gospel. And the reason we think he portrayed them as so clueless was that he was writing to a community that after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Temple of Jerusalem and Rome began to persecute Jews and Christians. This is the theory, many in Mark's community were terrified and assimilated back into their regular life. And little by little, the church is coming back together. And Mark wants to make sure that the people coming together know the disciples know better than they were. You know, this is the one where Peter denies Jesus 3 times. The disciples fall asleep 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane. Like over and over, he's like, look, do you notice these guys that are the disciples and how many times they messed up? You will be just fine. Like, come on back to the family. Luke, on the other hand, is writing a part 2. And in part 2, those same disciples lead the proclamation of the gospel to the whole world. So Luke softens his story of the disciples. They only fall asleep once. And then Luke gives them a reason for grief. They were so upset, they took a nap. Because I think Luke is reading Mark. I mean, Luke writes later. He has Mark in front of him. He's reading Mark, and he's thinking, nobody's going to believe these guys went on to take the gospel to the whole world. Like, I need to clean them up a little. And so that's kind of this, but in Mark, that's a real pattern. The people who should know don't, and the people who do know, you can't count on telling. So in that sense, it shouldn't surprise us at all that the women, like all the other disciples, fail. They don't tell. And then what gets really interesting about that, and this is the insight that I remember reading from someone years ago, and it just was like, what was really interesting about this is that means that at this point in the story, there's only one person left in the whole universe who knows who Jesus is and what has happened, that he's been raised from the dead. And you know who that is? It is the person reading. It's you. Like Mark I always thought like, okay, Mark tells a really crisp story. He just stinks at endings. And then I was like, oh my word, no, Mark is brilliant at endings because you've been reading the story. You're invested. It's moving right along. You know these characters. You know the story. At the end, everyone fails, and it hits you exactly what I mentioned before. This can't, I don't know where it was. Yeah, this can't be right. And then Mark's hope for impact is, I better go and tell. Like the word is not, I need to tell someone. This is amazing. And everyone else is quiet. It's my job to go and tell. And so Mark is creating this kind of narrative burden or urgency. It's not an invitation. It is like, you have got to tell. And it works. I mean, something about this works. Mark's the earliest story because, in fact, someone told, or we wouldn't have these stories. So Mark kind of creates that tension. I was like, then when I was reading that insight, and I was just like, oh my goodness, Mark is way better at endings than I thought. Then I thought, well, I've always been kind of hard on him for his beginning. Remember before I just said he has like the lamest, shortest, boringest intro ever? This is the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Like, seriously, Mark? Like, think how that compares to Matthew's long genealogy, or Luke's beautiful story of the angels and Mary, or John's poetic, in the beginning was the Word. This is the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Like, boom, nothing. Then I thought, wait. If Mark's really good at endings, and I didn't get it, maybe he's really good at beginnings, and I didn't get that either. And then what struck me was like, the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Maybe Mark's not talking about chapter 1, verse 1. Like, here, this is the beginning of the story I'm going to tell you. Maybe Mark is talking about all 16 chapters. Like, this whole story is just the beginning. Like, Mark, from the beginning of the story, says, I'm going to tell you this amazing story. You know what's most amazing? It is just getting started. Like, you now get to be in it. You get to be a character. You get to tell. In fact, it's imperative that you carry on this story.